Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Rifqi Ramadhan. I am from group of Victorian literature. So in this occasion, I would like to discuss the Oliver Twist novel by Charles Dickens. So Oliver Twist is one of the most famous novels in the English literature. This novel was written by a famous novelist named Charles Dickens. This novel appeared during the time of Queen Victoria, or usually called the Victorian era. The theme of this novel is the struggle of a child in living life in the harsh city of London during the Industrial Revolution. The setting of the novel is the city of London in 1837 in the Victorian era. Then the atmosphere in Oliver Twist is sad, touching, tense, and happy. Okay, then I will give a synopsis of this novel. The synopsis: Oliver is an orphan boy who lived in London, England in the 1837. His mom died right after giving birth to him, and he is sent to the parochial orphanage, where he and the other orphans are treated terrible and fed very little. When he turns 9, he is sent to the workhouse, where again he and the others are treated badly and practically starved. The other boys, unable to stand their hunger any longer, decide to draw straw to choose who will have to go up and ask for more food. Oliver lost on the appointed day. After finishing his first serving of gruel, he goes up and asks for more. Mr. Bumble, the beadle, and the board are outraged and decide they must get rid of Oliver. Apprenticing him to the parochial Mr. Sowerberry, it's not great there either, and after an attack on his mother's memory, Oliver runs away. Oliver walks toward London. When he is close, he is so weak he can barely continue, and he meets another boy named Jack Dawkins, or the Artful Dodger. The Dodger tells Oliver he can come with him to a place where a gentleman will give him a place to sleep and food. For no rent, Oliver follows, and the Dodger takes him to an apartment in London, where he meets Fadhli, and Oliver is offered a place to stay. Oliver eventually learns that Fagin boys are all pickpocket and thief, but not until he is wrongfully accused of their crime of stealing an old gentleman's house he is arrested. But the bookseller comes just in time to the court and say that he saw that Oliver did not do it. The gentleman whose handkerchief was taken, Mr. Brownlow, feels bad for Oliver and takes him in. And then I will explain the protagonist character in Oliver Twist novel. The first is Oliver Twist. Oliver is young, honest, plain, good heart, and good behavior, but often misread orphan who is raised in workhouse and find himself in danger to an undertaker, living with thief, and eventually taken in by the kind Mr. Brownlow and Miss Haley. His generosity of spirit is total, and even when faced with serious maltreatment, he never loses his sense of morality or kindness. He is an honest boy, but he was accused of stealing when he did not do it. This is the dialogue of Oliver Twist. "It wasn't me indeed, sir. Indeed, it was 2 other boys," said Oliver, clasping his handy passionately and looking around. They are somewhere. Oliver is good behavior. Oliver was told to return the book and pay the money to the bookseller. Oliver did it, and he didn't cheat Mr. Brownlow. Yes, do let me take them, if you please, sir, said Oliver. I will run all the way. I won't be 10 minutes, sir, said Oliver eagerly. Having buttoned up the banknote in his jacket pocket and placed the book carefully under his arm, he made a respectful bow and left the room. Oliver was told to steal in a house, but he didn't want, and pray for God that he better die than robbing. He is a kind boy. Oh, for God's sake, let me go, cried Oliver. Let me run away and die in the fields. I will never come near London, never, never. Oh, pray have mercy on me, and do not make me steal, for the love of all the bright angels that rest in heaven. Have mercy upon me. Oliver comes to see the Fagin in the cell even though Oliver often gets persecution and is taught to steal by Fagin, but Oliver is still being nice. Yes, yes, returned Oliver. Let me say a prayer. Do, let me say one prayer. Say only one. Upon your knees with me and we will talk till morning. The second protagonist character is Mr. Brownlow. Mr. Brownlow is a very respectable looking elderly gentleman. He takes a liking to Oliver even after suspecting him of stealing his handkerchief, and takes him in, doing everything he can to help to him. Poor boy, poor boy, poor boy, said Mr. Brownlow, bending over him. For a coach, somebody pray directly. Mr. Brownlow saw his young charge carefully and comfortably deposited, and here he was stand with a kindness and solicitude that knew no bounds. He loved Oliver very much and very trusting too. My dear child, said the old gentleman, moved by the warmth of Oliver's sudden appeal, you need to be afraid of my deserting you. Unless you give me cause, I have not, rejoined the old gentleman. I don't think you ever will. I have been deceived before the objects whom I have endeavored to benefit, but I feel strongly disposed to trust you. Nevertheless, and I'm more interested in your behalf than I can well account for, even to myself. The third protagonist character is Miss Maylie. Miss Maylie is an older lady who, despite her age, is very dignified and stately. She is the owner of the mansion that Sykes and Crackit attempt to rob. The adopted aunt of Rose Maylie in her kindness. She takes Oliver in. Miss Maylie was asked by Ross not to punish Oliver for trying to steal. This dialogue, my dear love, said the elder lady, as she folded the weeping girl to her bosom. Do you think I would harm a hair of his head? Oh no, replied Ross eagerly. No, surely, said the old lady. My days are drawing to their close, and may mercy be shown to me as I show it to others. What can I do to save him, sir? And then the dialogue. Next, I will explain the social value that contained in Oliver Twist's novel. That is the value of affection. The first is family value or kinship. The family or kinship value in the novel Oliver Twist is illustrated in this following text. The young woman will sit at the piano, play a pleasant song, or sing an old song that comforts her aunt in a soft, low voice. No candle is lit at a time like this. Oliver would sit behind one of the windows, listening to the sweet music, feeling immeasurably happy. From the text above, it can be concluded that the meaning of family or kinship value is very clear in the atmosphere listed in the text quote above. In this atmosphere, there is no visible difference in social class between the poor and the rich, only loving and sharing. The second value is love and affection value. The feeling of love is an imagine of strong affection, personal interest. Love is a good quality which inherits all kindness, feeling of compassion. The social value of love and affection in the novel Oliver Twist is depicted when Agnes, as a mother, risks her life to give birth to her beloved son Oliver Twist. This value is contained in this following text. The pale face of the young woman lifted weakly from the pillow. He spoke imperfect words in a low voice. "Let me see that child, then die." The text quote above described the atmosphere when Agnes gave birth to her tiny baby. Only those words he uttered until she died. The meaning of this value is the love and affection of a mother for her child with great struggle and sacrifice. He had to leave her family to be able to maintain the child she was carrying, although in the end Agnes could not see Oliver grow. The third value is helping each other value. The value of helping each other in the novel Oliver Twist is illustrated when Oliver is rescued by Mr. Brownlow after a thief trial he did not to do. This can be seen in the following text. Little Oliver Twist lay on his back on the sidewalk, his shirt unbuttoned, his temples soaked with water, his face as white as a corpse, and chills shaking all over him. Poor child, said Mr. Brownlow, bending over him. "Anyone? Please call the train, hurry!" As soon as the carriage arrived, Oliver was carefully laid down on the seat. The old man came in and sat down near him. From the text quotation above, it can be concluded that Mr. Brownlow, as a victim of a robbery with a heart to help Oliver, who was previously suspected of being the pickpocket, from the suffering that he experienced by bringing Oliver to his house. The meaning of the value of helping this can be an example for readers that we are obligated to help and have high empathy to love our fellow human who need help. The fourth value is caring value. The value of caring in Oliver Twist's novel is illustrated in this following text. Oliver also brings fresh reeds for Miss Rose's birds, which Oliver will use to tastefully decorate the cage, thanks to the skillful teaching of the village clerks. When the birds are handsome and tidy, there is usually a small gift to give in the village. Otherwise, there is always something to do in the garden or work on the plants, which Oliver does. From the quote above, it can be concluded that Oliver's behavior is a manifestation of the meaning of the value of his concern for the environment around him. Besides that, Oliver's concern for his work is because Oliver wants to please Rose as the owner of the environment. Oliver's concern received praise from Rose because Oliver was a diligent child and always wanted to try to develop himself as a better person. The fifth value is devotion value. Devotion in the Oliver Twist story is shown by Oliver when Rose Melly is seriously ill. Oliver is asked by Miss Melly to deliver a letter to a town some 6.5 kilometers away. This can be seen in this following text. He ran nimbly across the fields and along the bonds that sometimes divided him, occasionally almost hidden by a tall thorn on each side, and occasionally appearing in the open fields, where weeds and straw cutters were busy working. Didn't even stop, except every now and then for just a few seconds to catch his breath, until he came upon a very hot, dusty little market in the city. From the text quotation above, it can be concluded that the meaning of the value of dedication shown by Oliver when he was very enthusiastic about carrying out the task that was given by Miss Melly to him. Even the long distance he reached without complaint. Oliver didn't walk to get to the place, but he ran, running to reach his destination quickly, so that he could deliver the important letter in time. And the sixth value is loyalty value. The value of loyalty in Oliver Twist's novel is illustrated in this following text. "Precisely because I am your father, old friend, young man," replied Mr. Brownlow. "Because I was attached to him through hopes and dreams in youth and happiness, and through a beautiful being involved with him, who met God in youth and left me as a lonely man." From the text quote above, it can be concluded that the meaning of valued loyalty shown by Mr. Brownlow is sincere friendship with Monk's father, Mr. Leeward. They go through difficult and happy times together as a form of loyalty from friend and brotherhood. The friendship they live makes Mr. Brownlow reminisce about his true friend, and for the expression of his loyalty to his friend Mr. Brownlow, he tries to embrace monks to change and have a better life. So, it can be concluded that the meaning of the value of loyalty in the novel Oliver Twist is a positive value that must be done and can be an example for readers to apply it in social life. Okay, thank you so much, and the next explanation will be continued by my friend. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Rose May. Rose is Mrs. May's niece. She's a beautiful and kind-hearted 17 years old woman. Rose are the sweetest, most beautiful, and self-sacrificing women. Rose begs Mrs. Miley not to punish Oliver for trying to steal in their mansion, because she feels pity to Oliver and feels Oliver's pain, as stated in the novel. "Oh, can really believe that this delicate boy has been the voluntary associate of the worst outcast of society," said Rose. And she also said, "Think how young he is. Think that he may never have known as mother's love, or the comfort of a home that are usage and blows, or the want to bread may have driven him to hurt with men who have forced him to guilt. Aunt, dear aunt, for mercy's sake, think of this before you drag this sick child to a prison, which in any case must be the grave of all this. Change of amendment, oh, as you love me, and know that I have never failed the parents in your goodness and affections, but that I might have been equally helpless and unprotected with this poor child. Have pity upon him before it's too late." Next is Mr. Losberne. Mr. Losberne is the doctor who treated after the shooting. Treated Oliver. He is an eccentric and kind person, but he also liked to act without thinking. But he was adored by many people. He agreed and helped Rose to protect Oliver, as stated in this novel. Mr. Losberne said, "I think if you give me a full and unlimited commission to bully Giles and that a little boy, Brittles, I can manage it. Giles is faithful fellow and an old servant, I know, but you can make it up to him in 1,000 ways, and reward him for being such a good shot. Besides, you don't object that, unless there is some other way of preserving the child," replied Mrs. May. "There is no others," said the doctor, "and no others, take my word for it." Next is Nancy. Nancy is a kind-hearted, young and prostitute woman. She was raised in that profession by Fagin, but eventually she betrayed Fagin and Skies to save Oliver, and unluckily, because of her decisions, she had to pay for it with her own life, and getting killed by Skies. The example of her kind-hearted was when Nancy felt sorry for Oliver because she did not want Oliver to have the same fate as herself, who had been used as a doll by Fagin and Skies all this time, as stated in the novel. "If there anything else I can do to help you, but I cannot do anything about it." Next is when she protects Oliver from the attacks of Sky's dog. "Keep back the dog, Bill. He'll tear the boy to the pieces." Next is, I will talk about responsibility value. The value of responsibility in the novel Oliver Twist by Charles Dickens consists of value of acceptance and belongings, the value of obligations, and the value of discipline. First, acceptance value. The value in this novel Oliver Twist are listed in the following novel. Every morning, he goes to see the white-haired old man who lived near the small church. The man taught her to read, better as well as write. He spoke so kindly and was willing to go to great lengths to help Oliver, so that the little boy felt that his efforts to please him were never enough. From the text above, it can be concluded that a sense of belonging and acceptance is reflected when Oliver has the desire to learn to read and write while he lives in Miley's mansions. Next is obligation value. The value of obligation in the novel Oliver Twist is contained in the following text. Oliver was even more amazed to find Miss Miley's steadfastness had persisted and remained alert and calm in carrying out all the responsibilities assigned to her care for Ross. In fact, based on outward appearance, he still looked carefree. However, young Oliver didn't know what a steadfast and strong mind can do in conditions full of trials. From the quote above, it can be concluded that the value of obligation was applied by Mrs. Mary when she continued to carry out her obligation in caring for Rose even with a sad heart, because Mrs. Mary saw Rose are suffering and so sad. Next is discipline value. Discipline value in the novel Oliver Twist is contained in the following text. Then Oliver would go for a walk with Mrs. Mary and Rose, listen to them discussing about a book, or sit near them in the shade and listen to Miss Rose read, which Oliver did often until it was dark enough to read. Then he had to prepare his own lesson for the next day. In this case, he will toil in a small room that facing the garden. From the quote above, it can be concluded that discipline is applied by Oliver to himself by arranging his daily schedule of activities, and he is also responsible for accompanying Mrs. Mary and Rose on walks. Besides that, he is also responsible for developing himself by studying and reading. Thank you.
The antagonist characters is the characters that represent the opposition against which the protagonist must contend. In other words, the antagonist is an obstacle that the protagonist must overcome. The writer chose Fagin, Bill Sykes, Dodger Artful as the antagonist character. So let's go to the first. The first is Fagin. Fagin is a very old man with a villainous looking and repulsive face. Fagin is the leader of a gang of boy thieves and a very greedy and vicious man. It is Fagin who tries to turn Oliver into a thief and who betrays Nancy to Sykes, leading to her death. Fagin used the children to be a thief for him. "Aha!" said the Jew, shrugging up his shoulders and distorting every feature with a hideous grin. Clever dogs, staunch to the last. never told the old parson where they were, never poached upon old Fagin. And why should they? It wouldn't have loosened the knot, or kept the drop up a minute longer. No, 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 no. Fine fellows, fine fellows. He is a rough man. He closed the lid of the box with a loud crash, and laying his hand on a knife which was on the table, stayed furiously up. He trembled very much though, for even in his terror, Oliver could see that the knife quivered in the air. "What is that?" said the Jew. "What do you watch me for? Why you awake? What have you seen? Speak up, boy! Quick, quick, for your life!" Fagin incited Sykes to kill Nancy, because Nancy has betrayed them. "Do you hear me?" cried the Jew, his eyes flashing with rage. "Suppose he did all this, what then?" "What then?" replied Sykes with a tremendous oath. "If he was left alive till I came, I'd grind his skull under the iron heel of my boot into as many grains as there are hairs upon his death." "What if I did?" cried Fagin, almost in a yell. "I know that knows so much, and could hang so many beside myself." And the second is Bill Sykes, a stoutly built man in his 30s. Bill is a vicious housebreaker and thief who often works with Fagin, and is involved with Nancy. He often mistreats and eventually kills her. He told Oliver to come in and steal a house, and threatened him if Oliver wouldn't not do that. "He's a rude man." "Hush!" cried the man. "It won't answer here. Say another word, and I'll do your business myself with a crack on the head. That makes some noise, and it's certain as and is quite as certain and more gentle. He doesn't allow Nancy to go out to the house." "Cut my limbs off one by one," cried Sykes, seizing him roughly by the arm. "If I don't think the girl's stark raving mad." "Get up!" Sykes looked on for a minute, watching his opportunity, and suddenly, pinioning her hands, dragged her, struggling and wrestling with him by the way, into a small room adjoining, where he sat himself on the bench, and thrusting her into a chair, held her down by force. She struggled and improved by turns until 12 o'clock had struck, and then were an exhaust case to contest the point any for her. With a caution backed by many oaths, recovered the leisure and rejoining Fagin, Bill Sykes killed Nancy. "Let it be," said Sykes, thrusting his hand before her. "That's enough light for what I've got to do." The robber sat regarding her for a few seconds with dilated nostrils and heaving breast, and then, grasping her by the head and throat, dragged her into the middle of the room, and looking once toward the door, placed his heavy hand upon her mouth. And number 3 is Dodger Artful. Dodger is common-looking enough, but with the airs and manners of a man, although he is about Oliver's age. He is Fagin's best pickpocket, and it is he who finds Oliver and leads him to London and to Fagin. Plus, Dodger taught Oliver how to steal. "What's the matter?" demanded Oliver. "Hush!" replied Dodger. "Do you see that old cove at the bookstall?" The old gentleman over the way," said Oliver. "Yes, I see him." "He will do," said the Dodger. "A prime plan." Dodger spies on Nancy and tells the secret of Nancy to the Fagin. "I can see her face well," whispered Noah. "She is looking down, and the candle is behind her." Stay there," whispered Fagin. He sent to Bernie, who withdrew. In an instant the lad entered the room adjoining and under pretense of snuffing the candle, moved in the required position and speaking to the girl, caused her to raise her face. "I see her now," cried the spy, plainly. "I should know her among 1,000. And that is the three antagonists from Oliver Twist novel by Charles Dickens. And now I want to share you about the value of life in this novel. The value of life is the behavior of humans as a social beings who interact with other humans in carrying out daily social activities. Socializing life is based on mutually agreed upon rules for comfort and harmony in society. The value of life in the novel Oliver Twist by Charles Dickens consists of the value of justice, the value of tolerance, the value of cooperation, and the value of democracy. The first point is justice. The value of justice in Oliver Twist novel is contained in the following text, except based on the provisions in his father's will, Oliver should be entitled to all these assets. However, Mr. Brownlow apparently didn't want to lose the elder son's opportunity to repent of his past crimes and live an honest life. So he suggests this way of sharing, which Oliver gladly agreed. From the text excerpt above, it is clear that the meaning of the value of justice made Mr. Brownlow the inheritance of Mr. Leaford is equally divided between Oliver and Monks. Mr. Brownlow's goals is that Monks can change for better and coexist with his half-brother. Oliver happiness and harmony, that is manifestation of value, harmony. And the second point is the tolerance. The value of tolerance in the novel Oliver Twist is contained in the following text, except in the morning they will go to a small church, green leaves swinging off the window, birds chirping invisibly, and the sweet-smelling air seeped into the low veranda and filled the cozy building with its fragrance. Poor people are so clean and tidy. They knelt down to pray and fervently that gathering there seems pleasant. In a way, an exhausting obligation, although the signing may have been discordant, it was more real and sounded more melodious, to Oliver's ears at least, than any song he had heard in church before. From the text quotation above, it is clear that the meaning of the value of tolerance in the form of social life in the community that occurs in the my life family environment. They mingled together with the workers in the house of the worship. They fellowshiped and sang and prayed. At times like this, there is no longer any difference between rich and poor, upper class, lower class. Their only goal is worship and seek joy. Thus, it can be concluded that the higher the value of tolerance among human beings, the more happiness, prosperity, and prosperity is a country is guaranteed. And the third point is the value of cooperation in Oliver Twist novel is contained in the following text, except I have spoken to the men who were responsible for her arrest. They told me he couldn't escape. A payoff of £100 is announced by the government tonight. I'll add 50, said Mr. Brownlow, and I'll announce it with my own mouth at the place. If I ever get there, where's Mr. Mealy? The text both except an illustration when Mr. Brownlow was informed that the government had provided a reward for anyone who caught Bill Sykes. The prize is in the form of money of £1,000. Mr. Brownlow is willing to work with the government to add prize money total £150. Thus, it can be concluded that Mr. Brownlow's actions are manifestation of the value of cooperation. Cooperation to assist the government in eradicating crime so that social life is more secure and peaceful. And the fourth point is democracy. The value of democracy in Oliver Twist's novel is contained in the following text except all that I wish I could do, and more. Combining that poor girl's information with the knowledge I had beforehand, and from the result of our good friend's investigation on the scene, I will not give him the slightest room to escape, and he will expose all the evil that is now in a full light. Write a letter and set the day after tomorrow, 7 o'clock for the meeting. Text above the above text excerpt illustrated Mr. Brownlow's decision to gather all witnesses to meet in person with Monks, Oliver, and Rose. The goal is to reveal all the secrets that have been hidden as well as to reveal a crimes planned by Monks. Thus, from this take quote, it can be concluded that there is an attempt by Mr. Brownlow to realize a democratic value in order to uphold truth and justice in an issue that is a source of conflict. So, after that, we can conclude that we have the conclusion about this novel, this point of social values that we have. The social values in terms of the meanings of the values of love, responsibility, harmony of life in Charles Dickens' Oliver Twist are clearly visible in the contents of the story of this novel. The description of social values in this story clearly illustrated how the human way of life that was ugliness, which is seen in negative behavior, is won by the positive value of life shown by several characters in this story. These values are the value of love and affection, the value of devotion, the value of helping each other, the value of kindship, the value of caring, the value of loyalty, the value of acceptance and belonging, the value of obligation, the discipline, the value of justice, tolerance, cooperation, democracy. All of these values are connected with the text except depicted in the story, which is the meaning of social values from a literary works from Charles Dickens' novel Oliver Twist. So that's all for me. I hope it can helpful for you to understand what I explained. Okay, that's all. Thank you. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I know gold is not enough.